The other thing you just touched on was how you got into marketing with the Epic Content Marketing book. And now I saw right behind you, I see that book actually, um, the Epic Content Marketing, but it's the second edition. And for somehow you co-authored that second edition. Um, how did that happen? How did you get involved with co-authoring that second edition?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So, the first edition had such an impact on my career, so much of an impact that when I started actually going to Content Marketing World, which was Joe Pulizzi's big event that he was putting on, I started going in 2017. And every year that I went, I would track Joe down at the conference, take a selfie with him, thank him for writing the book, tell him how much it changed my career and how happy I was in content marketing. And then back in 2020, I started presenting at Content Marketing World. In 2021, I started asking Joe when I'd see him, when are you going to do a second edition? And then on October 13th of 2021, we were in a book club chat room in the CMI Slack community. And I just, asked him again, when are you going to update the second, when are you going to do a second edition of Epic? And he said, if you want to update it and co-author it with me, just let me know.
Wow.
I wrote back and I said, yes, absolutely. I would love to do that. And so it was a fantastic project, getting to work with him, getting to talk to so many, get so many case studies and talk to so many influencers in content marketing who are really doing it exceptionally at big brands and, for small creators as well. So it was a fantastic experience.
Well, congratulations, man. You just sold me. You just sold me, man. I got to get my copy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Tales Show. My name is Chris Rapozo, and today I have the honor to welcome my guest, Brian Piper. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, man. I've been following you for a while, so it's an honor to have you here. So let's dive right in. Okay. So did a little bit of research, as I always do in my guests. LinkedIn is my platform of choice to do that research. So I saw that you have a degree in creative writing from Missouri State University, and you are currently the director of content strategy and assessment at the University of Rochester. Talking about your journey, did you know from an early age that you wanted to work in marketing, and what do you love about marketing?
No, so actually, when I was a creative writing major, I wanted to be a freelance writer for rock climbing and skydiving magazines because those were my passions at the time. Ended up getting a job as a website developer, which eventually led to a job in advertising. But it wasn't really until I read the first edition of Epic Content Marketing in 2014 that I, discovered content marketing. And that's when I knew that I wanted to work in marketing. I wanted to learn how to, tell stories, to gain people's trust, to convince them that, we had the expertise or, authority that they needed to be, paying attention to and leveraging. And then eventually that trust would, kind of evolve into them wanting to use our services and products because they knew we were like legitimately trying to help them.
Okay. Okay. So two things I want to touch on what you just said. So skydiving, right? I saw that you were in the Army as an airborne in the airborne infantry.
That's correct.
So that led you from you did the skydiving first, then you went to the Army, or other way around?
So I started skydiving in the Army, but it's something that I've been doing for the last 32 years, pretty consistently.
Okay. Well, thanks for your service, my friend.
My pleasure.
The other thing you just touched on was how you got into marketing with the Epic Content Marketing book. And now I saw right behind you, I see that book actually, um, the Epic Content Marketing, but it's the second edition. And for somehow you co-authored that second edition. Um, how did that happen? How did you get involved with co-authoring that second edition?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So, the first edition had such an impact on my career, So much of an impact that when I started actually going to Content Marketing World, which was Joe Pulizzi's big event that he was putting on, I started going in 2017, and every year that I went, I would track Joe down at the conference, take a selfie with him, thank him for writing the book, tell him how much it changed my career and how happy I was in content marketing. And then back in 2020, I started presenting at Content Marketing World. In 2021, I started asking Joe when I'd see him, when are you going to do a second edition? And then on October 13th of 2021, we were in a book club chat room in the CMI Slack community. And I just, asked him again, when are you gonna update the second, when are you gonna do a second edition of Epic? And he said, if you want to update it and co-author it with me, just let me know.
Wow.
Wrote back and I said, yes, absolutely. I would love to do that. And so it was a fantastic project getting to work with him, getting to talk to so many, get so many case studies and talk to so many influencers in content marketing who are really doing it exceptionally at big brands and, for small creators as well. So it was a fantastic experience.
Well, congratulations, man. You just sold me. You just sold me, man. I gotta get my copy. Um, Now let's go to your full-time role as the director of content strategy and assessment at the University of Rochester. What drew you to the higher ed marketing world after spending years in the multimedia development in the military and defense sector?
Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't a desire to move into higher ed. I hadn't thought specifically about higher ed. There was a leadership change at my existing job at the defense contracting company. So I started kind of looking around for other job opportunities out there and came across the University of Rochester job. And I knew they were, a great company to work for, a great institution. Their brand is well known in our area, certainly for being an excellent employer. And when I was originally hired to do the job, my job description and the role was really to look at, just the content that our office, the Central Communications Office, was putting out. So our news center content, our newsletters, social channels, and really to look at all the data around that content to see what was working and what wasn't, try to figure out how to make it perform better. But then over the last 5 years, we've done so many really good things and made such great improvements in my department. My role has really expanded out to help provide guidance to content creators across the institution on different ways to, optimize performance, track, monitor, measure, connect with audiences. So it's really evolved into a much larger role than it originally started out. But I've really enjoyed the higher ed community because people are just so willing to share what they're working on and, what's going well and what's not going well. Coming from a defense contracting company, you would go to, you know, go to conferences and nobody could talk about what they were doing or what they were working on. And at a higher ed conference, you go sit down and immediately the conversation at the table is like, oh, well, I tried this tool and it didn't work for us. And, what are you doing? And so it's just wonderful to know how collaborative it is, not only within an institution, but across the higher ed landscape.
Yeah, it's a great community. I've noticed that myself when I went to conferences, how willing they are to share ideas with each other. And I saw that you're a member of directors at High Ed Web. We're involved with High Ed Web quite a bit as well. So we love them and we're always there to support them. And also, kudos to you for getting into the University of Rochester. My employer, Hannon Hill, Cascade CMS. University of Rochester uses Cascade CMS, and we're always impressed with the work that you all are doing with your website. So great job of getting in there and, keep up the good work. But let's talk about content strategy. How do you approach creating a content strategy specifically for higher ed institutions, and what makes it distinct from other sectors you have worked in?
Yeah, I mean, so higher ed is a very different landscape because, we tend to have more audiences with very different messages across our landscape. Not only do you have, potential undergraduates and their parents, but your faculty, your staff, your graduate students, international, all these different audiences. Even in a lot of cases, your content that you're creating, is specifically designed for, the board of directors or leadership or C-suite. So all these different kind of messages and audiences you have to think about. You have to think about different channels you're operating on. And then also, I think higher ed definitely has a tendency to be very siloed. So you have all of these smaller groups across the organization who are all very focused on their own content, their own audiences. And I think you get that even more than you do in traditional brands. But when you go back and you look at, the overall content strategy, the basic principles are still the same, for creating a strategy or a content marketing strategy at any level within any organization. You need to, clearly understand your specific strategic goals. So as your institutional goals, your school goals, your department goals, you have to have visibility across your entire organization to know where you're going. What's your final destination that you're looking to reach, and what are you trying to accomplish with each piece of content that you create? So I
Mm.
think, starting with strategy is the key, and then the next thing is really understanding your audience. So very specifically, who are you trying to reach with each piece of content that you create, and what action are you trying to get them to take in order to help you eventually, reach those strategic goals? So as different as higher ed is, fundamentally, it's still the same basic principles that apply. You have to know where you're going. You have to know who you're talking to.
Yeah, so and it's beautifully laid out for my next questions. Given those unique audiences in higher ed, students, faculty, potential students, parents, alumni, how do you ensure your content resonates with all these different groups? And do you so I work with the University of Florida, my alma mater, a lot, and they use me for spotlights and where are they now? So social proof pieces. Do you heavily rely on social proof pieces when you do your content strategy?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what we're trying to do, we're trying to be much more proactive with our content as opposed to reactive. So in
Mhm.
the past, we've often put out content because it was requested from, faculty or researchers or
Mhm.
someone. So we would react to those requests and put out that content. And now we're trying to be much more proactive and really trying to listen to our audiences and figure out what information they want, what content is helpful to them. And, we can gather some of that from looking at the data to seeing what content performs better on what channels. So you can target more of that content on those channels,
Mm.
really talking to those audiences and finding out, what do you want in your newsletter content? What sort of information are you going to come and read and share with your audience? So really, figuring out how to ask those questions, how to really understand what they're looking for, and then figuring out the right platform for each of those audiences, each of those pieces of content, and then making sure that you're measuring and tracking that, and then comparing that against some baseline performance so that you can see what content is working, what content's not working, what audiences are resonating on what channels. So I think
Mhm.
it's really just kind of paying attention to all of that and looking at the big picture is the way to, make sure that you're really communicating with your audiences in the way that they want, adding value for them.
Yeah, definitely adding value is a big part of that. And I've noticed that when they wrote a piece on me, I was sure to share that with my audience and with my mom and with my family. Other people do this as well. And then let's say grandma sees a piece of me and she says, "Oh, look at that." Throws it to my cousin. Hey, maybe you should consider going to this school.
That's how it happens.
Yeah. So in this fast-paced digital world, how do you keep up with the changing trends and adapt to your content strategy and higher ed marketing? ChatGPT is the big thing right now, as well as the Google Analytics 4 switch that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the best way to to stay connected and aware of what's going on is just stay as educated as you can, read as much as you can, listen to, great podcasts like this one. I go to as many conferences as I can. I follow experts in all different areas and engage with their content as much as I can. And really, as many communities as you can join and get into and find these conversations that are going on. Just, take every opportunity that you can to learn and to share and to speak, because I think that teaching is one of the best ways to learn. And I think when you have to teach something to someone and tell them, how to do it, it really makes you think about the details and, the nuances of different ways that you're going to accomplish a particular task. And I think just, you know, staying aware and keeping your eyes open and listening is key to, being able to keep up with everything that's going on. There's a lot going on.
That's awesome. Yeah, we teach best what we need to learn most. That's a quote that I love. And yeah, I can totally agree with that. I had to do a webinar last week on ChatGPT and one this week on Google Analytics 4. So ChatGPT, I'm always in that thing, but Google Analytics 4, not as much as I want to. And I really, really, really had to dig deep into that UA, Universal Analytics, and GA4, and had to figure it out. So I'll be able to present on it today. And that really helped me just understand, which I had to boil it down within the last 3 days, which would have taken me a much longer time if I wouldn't have to teach on it. So that's always a good way to go about it. One of your expertise lies in data analysis and analytics. How do you measure the success of your content strategy, and what metrics are most relevant in the context for higher education for you or your institution?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I get that question a lot. There are lots of ways to measure success. When people ask me, what metrics should I be measuring? My answer is always, it depends, which is never what they want to hear.
Yeah.
But it really does. It depends on what you're trying to do specifically with each piece of content. And content strategy, as I said, it always starts with the strategy before you get to the content. Instead of being content strategy, it really should be strategy content, but whatever. So like one of our strategic initiatives is to increase our brand awareness as a research institution. So, at a micro level, for an individual story that we know is a research story, we know which audience we're trying to hit with it. We measure the performance based on, traffic, page views, whether they take the action that we put in our calls to action, where we're ranking on the search engines for that particular piece of content. But you really have to be able to look at the bigger story, at the bigger picture, because strategically it's much more than just one story. So when we're talking about, showing the improvement of our brand, our awareness as a leading research institution, we really have to look at all of our research performance across all of our channels. So all the news center stories that are research focused, all the areas, all the newsletters that we're sending out that have research content, all the social posts, we tag our social posts so that we can see which ones are research focused. And then we can really start looking at the big picture, because that's much more strategic and going to have a much bigger impact. So, not only are we measuring our own content, our own research content, but we're looking at what our medical center is doing, what our business center is doing. They're doing research as well. So we want to try to promote their content and find ways to link it back to, other content that we're creating, that we're able to create those, connections that makes it easier for Google to find. It makes it easier for users to find. So really thinking, that the macro data, individual things that you're tracking for individual pieces of content, but really keep in focus on that, big picture, macro level data. So.
Yeah. So do you use Google Tag Manager for your social media? Okay.
Yes, we use Tag Manager, but then our social media team actually creates, we use UTM codes with campaigns, but then our social media group also tags every post within. they just do it in Google Sheets. So they'll put in the post and what date it was posted and what time it was posted, and then what the strategy that it aligns with, what the audience is, so that then we can go back and look at the performance of each of those individual pieces of content and see how many pieces of, how many tweets did we do about research content this month? How did they perform? What audiences are we talking to on those channels? So, yeah.
Very sophisticated operation over there in Rochester. Let's stay with the social media for a bit. How does social media fit into your content strategy, and how do you leverage it to engage the higher ed audience?
Yeah, I mean, so social media is huge. It's one of the best ways to really, grow an audience, to reach particular audiences. We know that, millennials and Gen Z spend quite a bit of time on social media. So we know that's where they're consuming. TikTok is one of the top search engines now for millennials. So we know that we want to be on those channels. You have to create content to fit those channels for your particular audiences. But we also know that those channels, in Epic content marketing, we call that rented land,
Mm.
because you only control so much on those channels. You don't control distribution. You don't control how widely it's shared. You have limited control over, whether or not you even stay on that channel or not. We have seen a lot of accounts closed or channels, unavailable for certain amounts of time. So we're careful about putting too much emphasis on building an audience just on those channels. And we really look for every opportunity we can to convert those audiences off of that rented land onto our own land. So we want to try to get their email address. We want to send them to content that's valuable to them, to draw them into our website, sign up for our newsletters, request information about our different programs and schools. So while we're very active on social. We have, students running our TikTok account. They're creating great content, but we're always looking for ways to point those users back to, some way that we can start capturing information about them that they share with us willingly.
Yeah, definitely get them on that newsletter,
That's
because
right. Right.
you never know when one of those platforms may shut down, and if that's one of your main drivers, there goes your pipeline.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we've seen it with, what's going on with Twitter right now. It's a very interesting landscape, interesting environment there. And TikTok, we've seen, that getting banned in different, certainly different countries, but in different institutions, different government bodies. So yeah, you'll have very limited control over that space, but you always have control over your website space.
Yeah, this Twitter thing that was really hot around last fall when I was at an AMA ad conference. They were talking about Twitter refugees going to LinkedIn and such. It's like,
Right.
wow, pretty hot right there for a moment, but I feel like it cooled down maybe a little bit, or people got used to it. Um, so as you look to the future, especially with the rise of generative AI, what trends or changes do you anticipate in higher education content strategy, and how do you prepare for them?
Yeah, and I think, with the abundance of AI generated content that we're starting to see out there, I think we're going to see more and more institutions, colleges, universities really looking to establish that voice, their own, authentic
Mhm.
perspectives on things. I think we're going to see a lot of integration of AI into different solutions. We're going to see people using AI much more to, automate repetitive tasks and find better ways to measure performance and do data analysis. We're going to see AI integrated into a lot of the tools that we already use. And I think, really in the long term, it's going to make our jobs easier. It's going to allow us more time to be more creative and to be more strategic, and really to start thinking more big picture and less focused on all the minutia of everything that we have to do, in our day-to-day jobs. Hopefully it'll take some of that on and get some of it off our plates.
Yeah, that's something our common friend Kyle Campbell touched on last week during the ChatGPT webinar. The commoditization of content, and that thought leadership is going to be more on the rise now, and you have to establish your brand. So people no longer look for that content, but they look more for the author that they trust, and then they read the author's post instead of any given post that they find on Google. So that's a good point. So with your vast experience in marketing, what is one important lesson that you've learned over the course of your marketing career that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I think just, really focus on learning and innovating, look for new opportunities, look for ways to connect with leaders in your industry. I think you can learn so much from watching other people, and every time you can learn from someone else's mistake, that's one less mistake you have to make.
Okay, perfect. And now, what are two books you recommend anyone should read about becoming a better marketer? And don't be shy to promote your own book.
Well, I have to say, Epic Content Marketing is kind of it's the case study, it's the example, it's the encyclopedia for how to do content marketing. It goes all the way from beginning basics all the way to complicated new technology integration. So obviously, that's my first choice. Second book that I recommend to everyone is Everybody Writes. So Anne Handley's second edition of her book. It will teach you how to be a better writer, a better communicator, a better leader, all while making you laugh while you read it. It's a fantastic book.
And you recently met her, didn't you? How was that?
I did. It was wonderful. She was very impressed by all the notes that I had in her book. She was glad that I got so much value out of it. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Awesome, man. I saw that post on LinkedIn. I recommend everybody follow Brian on LinkedIn as well for some great content and some encouragement as well. So, as we close the episode, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can reach me at brianwpiper.com or Brian W. Piper on basically any social channel. So feel free to connect. Always glad to talk content marketing, content strategy, AI, Web3, content optimization, all sorts of fun stuff.
Awesome, Brian. Really appreciate you being on the show and sharing all your insights with the audience.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right, you take care now.